Well, hello. Welcome to a new edition of Let's Talk. And I'm currently in my series where I'm sharing some of the observations that I've made of some of the main characters in the movie The Devil Wears Prada. I'm talking about how so many of them exhibit trauma responses. And so far, I have covered Miranda Priestley, who is editor-in-chief of Runway magazine in the movie. I've also talked about her first assistant, Emily, who is actually quite like Miranda in many, many ways. And this week, I want to shift gears and I want to speak about another character named Nigel. Now, I'm not exactly sure of what Nigel's title is. Maybe it's, I don't know, creative director of the magazine, but he does a lot with the day-to-day of the magazine, whether it's, thinking about collections that the magazine is going to showcase, thinking about, special features that the magazine is going to host. He is incredibly involved in all of the details of the magazine. He is essentially Miranda's right-hand man. And from what I can gather from the movie, he seems to also be a close personal friend of Miranda. So it's very possible that maybe, they've worked together for many, many years and they've kind of built a personal relationship over that time. But it's pretty clear that Nigel is the one person in Miranda's orbit that she seems to respect. That she seems to genuinely enjoy being around, the person whose voice she actually listens to, so that if he disagrees with her, she really kind of takes it in stride and listens to what he has to say. And so that is really important context because toward the end of the movie, for those of you who have seen the movie, for those of you who have not, essentially, Nigel gets betrayed by Miranda. And, from the outside looking in, you could tell that it was a very painful experience for him. But what's interesting is the way that he responded to the betrayal, which happened publicly. All right. So this wasn't something that happened behind closed doors. It happened publicly. The way that he responded to the betrayal was actually very interesting. I think that had it been me, frankly, if had it been maybe you or other people, the betrayal was so hurtful that there may have been some sort of outburst or some sort of display of anger. But instead, Nigel just kind of mutters something under his breath about the situation. And then you can tell from his expression that he just kind of resigned himself to the betrayal. It was something that, to me, made it seem that for him, Miranda's betrayal was familiar, expected, maybe something that he had to navigate in the past. And so the way that I kind of looked at that whole situation, as I look back at the arc of the story and his role and her role, is that when we experience repeated betrayal, when we experience disloyalty, one of two things can happen. And I'm going to say like the first time we experience it. The first time we can probably be upset. We can address it, and then we can decide whether or not we're going to remain in relationship with the person. Even on the job, if we are betrayed by our boss, we can make a decision about whether or not we're going to stay or we're going to leave. But what's interesting about Nigel is that you could tell that it wasn't the first time he experienced her betrayal, but he also, even though it was a surprise, he also didn't allow that betrayal to derail his loyalty to Miranda, which is fascinating if you think about it. Like, if you think about it, what would make someone loyal to a person who has no loyalty to them? Perhaps you can imagine in your own life, what have you ever experienced that brought to light that you were more loyal to someone than they were to you? And what did you do in response to that? I think that because Nigel saw his livelihood as connected to Miranda, he saw his platform, he saw his influence, he saw his power as connected to Miranda, he actually allowed what was not okay to be okay. And whether that's in the professional sphere, whether that's in your own life, if we're not careful, trauma will cause us to make what isn't okay, okay. So as I looked at Nigel, there were a few thoughts that I wanted to share with you, just a few things that I took from it that I think really highlight how betrayal trauma can change you. The first thing is, when you experience repeated betrayal, what it can do is it can make you start to see mistreatment as normal. People looking from the outside in would say that's not right, that's not good, but because it's something that maybe you're used to or you're familiar with, you could even make excuses for it because it's something that for you may be normal. And this is a question that we have to consider is, are there experiences that we're having that frankly, the average person would not think is normal? So a consistent pattern of betrayal will make you think mistreatment is normal. Secondly, when you experience trauma over and over again, you can actually start to blame yourself. You can start to think that perhaps if you changed, if you did something different, that the other person would behave differently. And so you begin to accept responsibility for their choices. Third, repeated betrayal, whether it's in a marriage, on the job, whether it's with a friend, repeated betrayal can make you prioritize other people's needs over your own. Because again, it gets back to this idea that, well, if I'm just better, if I just do things differently, then maybe they'll be loyal to me. If I change myself, then maybe they'll change for me. And so we will prioritize their needs and their desires even above ourselves and what's good for us. Number 4, when we experience betrayal, especially repeatedly, we struggle to advocate for ourselves. And some of it could be because of gaslighting. So gaslighting is a psychological term that's used to describe a scenario where another person causes you to question your own reality. They cause you to question your experience. And so if you're dealing with someone who does that, someone who betrays you over and over again, and you bring it to light like, hey, this thing wasn't right. And they're like, well, what would make you think that? You know, why would you think I would even do something like that? Well, because you did. But they will make you say, well, maybe they didn't do that, or maybe they didn't mean that. And so you will start to silence yourself in response to their repeated betrayal. And then number 5, if you aren't aware of this kind of cascade of responses to trauma, you can actually begin to settle for less than you deserve. Because again, you start to think that what isn't okay is okay. You start to think that mistreatment is normal. And so you begin to settle for less than you deserve. And so I think in the case of Nigel, he really is a case study of what can happen when you remain in a situation where you are loyal to someone who has no loyalty to you. And I put this before you just to consider, because if you are in a friendship or other relationship or even a professional situation where you are finding that you have been betrayed, you have been undermined, you are finding that your reality is being dismissed, marginalized, and questioned, this isn't healthy. And it isn't normal either. And so how do we break the cycle, right? Like, how do we empower ourselves to release a relationship where we are being repeatedly betrayed? Well, Isaiah 61:3 says that God gives us a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. So if you are experiencing what feels like grief and discouragement and sadness and pain, the first thing you have to realize is that's not God. It's not God. I don't care what the person says. I don't care what scriptures they use. That is not how God treats us as his people and as his children. And so I think the first step to breaking free from the repeated trauma of betrayal is you have to know that who you are in God means that you don't deserve that. You don't deserve that. It really starts with understanding who you are and the fact that you were made for what God has promised to give you. That's beauty, that's joy, that's praise, that's delight. You were made for that. And then I think secondly, and most importantly, you got to see the situation for what it is. A lot of times we stay in toxic situations because we're kind of holding on to a false hope that if I just stay, it will change. If I just stay a little while longer, they will see the need to change. But what's unfortunate about that line of thinking is that the longer you stay, the less likely they are to change, because the longer you stay, the easier it becomes for them to rationalize that their behavior is okay, because if it wasn't, you would have left. See? So what I would encourage you to do is, as you're just considering the relationships in your life, as you're considering the situations you may be in personally or professionally, instead of kind of resigning yourself and accepting another person's repeated bad behavior, know who you are in God, know what you deserve, and you have to be willing to press the eject button, because people don't change because you want them to. People change because they want to. I hope you got something out of this, and please share it with a friend if you do. I would love for you to like this, subscribe to my channel so that you can, of course, be the first to know about any new content that I share. And of course, you can join my newsletter by reading the instructions in the caption. I will see you again right back here next week. Thank you for watching.